Welcome back to News Channel 3 Live at Night. What we are about to tell you may well shock you. According to a new study, 60% of women, we're talking grown women, grown folk, have an eating disorder.
That's over half of us. And we're not just talking about anorexia or bulimia, two of the more familiar forms of eating disorders. In fact, the newest emerging problem is with calorie prisoners. Mary Margaret Johnson counsels people with eating disorders at Heart Life Soul Care, and she joins us live this morning to talk a little bit about this new trend in eating. I won't say trend, but this new problem with eating disorders. Calorie prisoners.
I think that's a very general term for saying that most women who are struggling with eating disorders, most women who are struggling with body image, which is over 80% of us,
That's crazy.
are calorie prisoners.
What does that mean? When we sit down to a meal, what are we automatically calculating, this bite, that bite? What do we do?
I wouldn't say that the majority of us are always calculating. I would say that those with eating disorders, anorexics and bulimics especially, are counting their calories always. But we live in a diet-obsessed world. We have a $40 billion dieting industry.
Wow.
And
But when you hear all these studies, of course we're in the news, when you hear all these studies, you see all this research that says you have to eat better because everything we're eating is making us sick or killing us literally. Isn't it important to be conscious about what you're eating and putting in your body and maybe counting and watching the calories and the intake?
I think that it's important. One of the terms that we use is eating intuitively. You know, we eat, especially in the South, we eat around everything.
Okay, without thinking sometimes.
Without thinking. We eat to satiate our sadness, you know, any problems, food, even a drink of water. If you or I were about to cry, if we stopped and picked up a glass of water and took a sip, it would satisfy us temporarily, and the lump would go down. We would feel so much better temporarily, and that's what food does.
So what you're saying is anytime you use food as anything other than nourishment and fuel for your body, you have a potential of taking that too far. Is that going too far?
If you're not conscious of eating when you're hungry, stopping when you're full,
we don't do that.
Right, we don't do that here. Eat, eat, eat. Food in and of itself isn't bad.
Right.
It's how we approach food. And it's how we approach, I think the bottom line is we're so uncomfortable in our skin. When the new, 40, is 50, the new 30 is 40, and you're looking at Demi Moore and Angela Bassett and all of these gorgeous women who have trainers and dietitians and people cooking their food for them. We don't live in a culture that supports that reality.
So the numbers of women, mature women who should know that they're okay if they're a 12, who have eating disorders is surging, right? Because when I was a teenager, it was teenagers
that had the eating.
And then it went away.
We're a nation of comparison. The average female is 5'4" and 140 pounds. The average model is 5'11" and 117 pounds.
Now that's just wrong.
And we compare that, and we go from extremes. You know, we want to look beautiful. It's in the heart of a woman. I mean, if you look,
certainly,
it is in the heart of a woman to be desirable and to be beautiful
and
look good. Yes, but we've defined in our culture what beauty looks like. Beauty isn't necessarily, it's not skin deep.
So what do we do to cultivate our own definition of the standard of beauty, one that we feel comfortable in?
Right. One, I think it starts, you say older women are developing more eating disorders.
Well, it's like you said, when you're looking at a 44-year-old Demi Moore and she literally looks 25, 27, that kind of throws in the face of a 44-year-old woman sitting in Memphis like, can't I look like that?
Right. And I think it's important for mothers to be conscientious of what they say in front of their children, to promote positive self-esteem, that God made you beautiful. You know, you're beautiful from the inside out, not from the outside in. If I'm talking about my weight and I'm so unhappy with the way that I look, my 4-year-old is looking at me and thinking, but mommy's perfect. If something's wrong with mommy, something has to be wrong with me.
Well, and I imagine if you approach, no honey, you shouldn't have that ice cream cone because it's going to make you fat, instead of, honey, I think you've had enough sugar and it's not that good for you? Is that the way you, because you clearly do want to
Absolutely.
instill good eating
Right.
habits
Absolutely.
in them, but for the right reasons?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. We're seeing girls particularly mature. So we've talked about this.
Yes.
You know, they're starting their cycles very much younger. They're developing breasts at 9, 10.
Yes.
Are you also seeing eating disorders at
Yes.
those ages? That is so sad.
The number one wish of young girls from 11 to 17 is to lose weight
Oh, wow.
at
or to be
11?
skinny. Dieting is starting as early as 10. 20 years ago, when I was in the 5th grade, I had friends taking diet pills. So if that was 20 years ago, and the eating
In 5th grade?
in 5th grade,
Wow.
Wow.
and you have to understand part of that is peer pressure. An overweight child starts feeling insecure because she's not as skinny as someone else. Skinny girls feel less insecure because they're not, you know, as
Developed.
full-figured or developed as other girls.
It's all about being so body
And
conscious.
bullying. Eating disorders are caused by a variety of problems: psychological, societal, interpersonal, and some biological issues.
And you also mentioned that overeating is an eating disorder. Any time you use food for anything other than fuel, which we've said, does that qualify?
Sure. Overeating has become even more prevalent in our society, and for a variety of reasons too: self-esteem, depression. Food feels good. It feels. I laughed recently in watching He's Just Not Into You, and the quote that I walked away with that I thought, this is America. The girl said, "Honey, he's dumped you. Go get a bag of ribs and a bucket of ice cream." That's the
feel better.
society we live in. So if you have emotional problems, don't substitute it with food. If you're struggling with food and obsessed with food, get help.
So how can we get help? What do we do?
We can start with our children, and those who are struggling with self-esteem and body image issues need to find a qualified therapist who works as a part of a team. When working with eating disorders, it's important that you're with a good therapist, a good physician, and a good nutritionist.
So we can find you. We put the information on the screen. That sounds like a great place to get help.
And there are a lot of other great resources, the National Eating Disorder Association, as well as the Eating Disorder Coalition of Tennessee, and Heartlife.
Wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Mary Margaret. Wow. And speaking of eating, how do you cut back the fat, the sugar, the salt in your child's school lunch?
Well, we're going to tell you how to pack a great school lunch that'll be tasty as well. Stay with us.